Every so often, as I take in the news in the world of cleaner, greener, and safer transportation, I come across a story so wildly wrong-headed that I momentarily have to concentrate on swallowing my tea and not spraying it across the teletype. And that was the case a while back when a story clattered in that claimed that EVs cost more to fuel than fossil-fueled vehicles. A claim so ridiculous that you'd have to perform Olympic-level contortions to make it true. But, of course, like all these things, if you say it often enough, people start to question whether there's maybe a crumb of truth in there. So today we're going to look at just what that study said and how it reached those conclusions. That's right, it's time for another FUDBUSTING! But first, I looked in the sky where a notification bell was looking at me from a subscription link, and all that I knew was the click of my mouse was letting in news and checking your notification settings. No? Okay. Transport Evolved's proprietary blend of fresh-as-a-daisy news, reviews, and context is supported by viewers like you, and by me mauling song lyrics. If you'd like me to stop or continue, hang out till the end of the video when I'll tell you how you can support the channel. Oh, and if you're a Patreon supporter, first up, thank you. But can I take a moment to get you to check your details with Patreon, because apparently a chunk of our supporters cards have expired and not been updated. And when I say chunk, I mean over 250 people, most of whom were pledging an average of $5 a month. Yeah, that adds up to quite a lot. So if you can take a moment, that would be great. Thank you very much. So let's first look at what the study...
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
What the study says. It's pretty blunt. Quote, "The direct monetary cost of fueling EVs is often higher than for comparable ICE vehicles." End quote. It then goes on to suggest that in Michigan, a state with a kind of middling gas taxation for the US, the cost per mile to run a gas car is about 8 cents, and it claims the cost per mile for an EV is around 13 cents. To reach that conclusion, Anderson Economic Group states that it conducted a, quote, "rigorous analysis of the real-world costs to fuel both types of vehicle. We included all categories of costs, including several that are commonly omitted in other EV studies." The study is quite specific about including 4 things its authors describe as the hidden costs of EV charging. So let's work through them. The first is the purchase of a home charger. This is something that for folks driving more than 30-ish miles per day is definitely a cost to factor in. A footnote in the study indicates that the authors used a cost of $600 to, quote, "install a level 1 charger." That's the charger that comes free with many EVs and plugs into a regular outlet, so yeah. They suggest a cost for a level 2 charger of $1,600, which, with installation, is not wholly unrealistic. The study also goes to great lengths to include charger losses while charging, which is something I've not seen included much before and which does have an impact on cost to charge. I'd say kudos, but as my maths teacher would say, show you're working. Tangent alert. Because losses aren't a constant like pi or the speed of light in a vacuum. Losses vary from charging station to charging station and from car to car. And they vary hugely between a domestic charging station sitting on your garage wall and the massive Tesla supercharger down the road. They'll vary depending on which brand of car you buy and what iteration of hardware it has. The authors also include a time penalty for charging for both residential and commercial charging. I'm not going to get into all the really challenging assumptions they make because, well, we don't have enough time. But let's pick one. They assume a full minute and a half for connecting an already set up home charger, which I can't even... I mean, maybe? Maybe if your charger is a long way away and you have to thread it around plants or other vehicles, or Perhaps if every day you're setting up a level 1 charger and plugging it into a wall outlet. I mean, I take about 5 seconds, maybe 10. I pull up, I open the flap, and I stick the plug in the socket, and I walk off. And Nikki tells me her charging stations, which actually communicate with one another to make sure they're not pulling more than the circuit they share can handle, takes a maximum of 20 seconds to agree on how much power each unit can draw. So you might want to hang out and wait for that, I suppose? But if you're going to look for trying to make EVs look as bad as possible, then sure, make the total amount of time it takes to use a home charger almost the same amount of time you're allocating to fill up and pay for a tank of gas. Okay, so that's all somewhat ridiculous, but where it really gets kind of wild is the next section. The second, quote, hidden cost is the cost of commercial and public charging. And while we discussed this, bear in mind that US Department of Energy data suggests that 80% of charging is done at home, because that number is going to be important. And it makes the assumptions here based on forum comments, including conversations on Reddit, the author's personal experience and maker-specific forums. Yes, I am serious. It makes that seem even more wild. And before we even get into that, the study's authors explicitly decide that free chargers at malls and shops will be included in the calculations, but charged at a standard commercial rate, because the driver might have to buy some kind of service to use them, which is, I suppose, a possibility. I mean, most free chargers I've ever found have been free, apart from maybe having to stare at an advert, but yeah, you do you, I guess. Then we get into free charging that's bundled with cars, which is, drumroll please, charged at a commercial rate. Because, quote, the consumer ultimately pays for the bundled service with the price of the vehicle. So here, are they arguing that you should discount the cost of the car's purchase because the authors have included this cost here? No, weirdly not. Okay, so let's get back to the author's ratio of commercial to non-commercial charging. The authors provide for two scenarios: people who mostly charge at home and people who mostly charge using a commercial charger because of a lack of home charging. For those mostly using commercial charging, they estimate 4 to 8 visits per month to a commercial charger. But for those charging at home, their maximum assumption is that 70% of charging is done at home. Given that actual data says 80%, this is wrong. It's just wrong. Using anecdotal comments and your own experience does not an accurate study make. Okay, so while in some regards it feels like it's not worth continuing because it's clear that this is really just fossil fuel propaganda in a fancy ball gown, let's look at the other two additional things the authors think will make people dislike EVs. I mean that they need to factor in to get accurate results. First is what they call deadhead miles. The authors describe these as miles spent driving to find far-flung charging stations which, they contend, are not located where people want to go. And that was once true, but with the massive build-out of infrastructure over the past few years, both in Europe and in the US, that's really not true anymore. It's rare that I'll drive more than a mile or two out of my way to find a charger on a long journey, and as route planning software like a better route planner has become available, and slowly legacy automakers are working to catch up to Tesla's route planning and charging integration, it's becoming pretty much a non-issue. Then finally, in a section whinier than a Ferengi realizing they've got a bad deal, the study includes a penalty for time spent trying to find a reliable charging station. And look, I'm the last person to claim that EV chargers are more reliable than a tired Firefly-class ship, but seriously, the authors state, quote, EV drivers face recurring problems at chargers such as breakdowns, software bugs, delays in syncing the mobile application with the charger output being significantly lower than advertised, and outright failures. This is in addition to the problem of vehicles blocking or, quote, icing EV charging spots, end quote. While there have been spates of icing, and a good look at my social media will show that I've had more than a little experience with flaky EV charging, it's now incredibly rare that I don't just move to an adjacent working charger. My rants on Mastodon are just venting. This feels like a description of the EV world as it was a decade or more ago, before multi-headed, multi-unit chargers became the standard. And while the authors updated the study this year, it looks like it has pretty much the same utterly ridiculous arguments, which is realistically the only way to make gasoline vehicles' maths look better than buying an EV, which is where we land. We're undoubtedly going to see more of this as EV market share continues to grow, and the traditional income stream for a lot of companies with a lot of power gets more and more threatened. So be prepared to debunk a lot more of this, well, bunk. And that way you can be ready when some of the more egregious rubbish that people try and palm off as evidence that fossil fuel vehicles are better comes along. That's it for today. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back soon with more. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave your comments below or in our free to join Discord chat room. There's a link below. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolved Take 2, and give the bell a gentle ding to make sure you're told when our next video goes live. And of course, check your notification settings. Thanks on behalf of the entire TE crew go out to the folks on my right. They are our $15 to $49 a month supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons: Chris Maxwell, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, David Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leong, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tesla in the Gong, Gordon C, Stephen O'Donoghue, Kyle Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Rory Litwin, Jim Burness, Chrissa Center, and Denny Hyde. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters: Anonymous Freak, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, JP Fagerback, Will Graylan, Matthew Drobnak, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Laura Reynolds, Ellery Hensley, and Ian. Feeling left out? You can join Patreon at the link below. Hit the join button down there to support us on YouTube, or show us your support through Bitcoin, Ko-fi, or our cool swag store. If you're not in a position to do that right now, know that liking, sharing, and commenting on our videos really helps support us too, and helps us with the all-powerful algorithm. No. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving. I must be back in reality again. Oh no, look at all those gas cars. Heavy. Oh no, the gas cars filled up with diesel. I wonder why they don't make wholemeal diesel. Oh no, Elon Musk's delivered more lupins.